All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking about real music in real time for real people just like you, just like me. Okay, so I did it. I went and ordered Disney Plus for a month so I could watch Get Back, the movie slash documentary slash voyeur film about the Beatles. I mean, first of all, let me start before I forget some of these points I want to make here. The cinematography, this is captured in 1969, right? The cinematography is stunning. I mean, I know they have cameras all over the place and they did this on purpose, but the quality of this footage is spectacular. Unless, they use some kind of technology to clean it all up and it wasn't very good. But they put cameras everywhere. They put microphones everywhere. I think they knew they were doing something for posterity. It's like a time capsule, but they capture all of this dialogue. And that's what the movie, documentary, film, whatever, is primarily about: the interactions, at times the goofiness. Um, John Lennon, again, doing his Groucho Marx at times, not literally, but figuratively. And Paul McCartney being like the straight man, just let's get to work, let's do this. Um, it's just a really stunning film from that standpoint. I'm watching it going, this looks like it was filmed this year. It just was breathtaking in scope, in the clarity that it shows. It's crazy. And you see all of the 1969 London, England, you see all of this in its entirety. And it is really a time travel moment for the rock fan, just for somebody who wants to go back and kind of feel that era in that country. Obviously, if you're from the States, some of the dialogue, it's just very entertaining. The words, the tea, they're bringing out tea, like gallons of tea, and not crumpets per se, but I think toast and sandwiches. And so there's a lot of kind of really cool extracurricular stuff going on. Now, Yoko Ono, um, I want to bring her up right away. She just doesn't go away. She stays next to John Lennon. The only time I think she kind of gets pushed off to the side is when they're finally on the rooftop doing the concert. She is just glued to him. And to me, if I were there, I would have been like, okay, we need to have an intervention with John. All right. We need to just be in the room together as a band. Yoko should not be attached to John Lennon. They say that this was really bad, or I've heard this was bad before, but watching this movie unfold, it's really just hard to fathom how she just wouldn't leave his side. And it's awkward. And I'm thinking, if I'm any of the other Beatles, I'm saying to myself, John, can you leave her at home? Can you leave her at home? Can you just get her out of here? But she stays, and she never leaves. Linda Eastman, who would later become Linda McCartney, she shows up in this. And she's a pleasant surprise. It's great to see Linda, the late Linda McCartney. She has this beaming, sort of happy demeanor. And again, she isn't in this thing the entire time. It's almost as if she kind of gets phased in as the movie goes along, but she's not like sitting on Paul's lap throughout the entire movie. George Harrison, obviously there is tension, and the tension about the, I'll play it any way you want it. I'm sure you've heard that before, where George is telling Paul, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. And they have that footage in there. But there are other moments where it just seems as though George really isn't a part of the conversation. Even when he chimes in and has some good ideas and some constructive criticism, It's like Paul and John just kind of roll right over him. Ringo is very quiet in this. He does his job. He is fantastic when they get up to the roof. Ringo Starr becomes like a lead drummer. A lot of people just sort of discount Ringo Starr. He keeps the time. He's interesting. He's a little quirky. But on the roof, he is driving that band. In fact, in most of the sessions, he sounds like Ringo on steroids. If you've listened to Ringo on Beatle records, you're thinking, okay, he does a good job. But this was somewhat different. The guitar tuning that both John and George use is a little more open. It's a little more almost jazzy or bluesy. There's something else going on with it. And it adds to kind of the time period that they're in, which is 69, 70, going into that. And I like it. It's bolder. It's a little fresher. It's a little more rock and roll. You know, it's not quite, you know, like country or folk, although there are moments on Let It Be that go down different roads, like pretty much every Beatles album. Paul McCartney, for better or worse, is kind of the creative genius, and you can't really deny it, and I'm not trying to. I just think that they underutilize both John and George, and maybe even Ringo, as far as their songwriting talents, their contributions to this. Paul McCartney, though, sits there, and there's this amazing moment where he's just banging out on either a mandolin or guitar, I forget, but he's banging out what would later become Get Back, and he's doing it very improv, very like, I've got to write a song and I've got something in my brain and I'm going to get it out. And it's astonishing. And obviously you've got other compositions like Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road. I mean, it's one incredible songwriting feat after another. Now, maybe back when it was being recorded, the other guys were like, yeah, right, this is okay. It's schmaltzy high school dance theme music or whatever, but it ends up being epic. But you can't deny the power of Paul and John when they are working in sync. John seems, again, a little bit less interested in being serious throughout this entire thing, whereas Paul is like the taskmaster. Now, another interesting aspect of this is the presence of Glyn Johns, who is a great producer and sound engineer. He's overseeing all of this. George Martin has kind of an executive producer, perfunctory role in this. He's not hands-on, whereas Glyn is giving these guys advice. From what I know about Glyn Johns, he's a great producer, but he's a taskmaster. He gets a lot out of people, more than they know they have. Just ask the Eagles, who couldn't stand Glyn Johns and actually had to switch producers because Glyn was getting under their skin. Rhyme intended. I don't know. It's just how it worked out. But throughout this entire documentary, there are moments where you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is just a great time capsule. There are other moments where you're thinking to yourself, George, get out of there. Just get out. Just get away from those guys, because you just sense that George has his own thing and they don't really respect it, or they can't incorporate it into what they're doing. It's like oil and water to some degree. And Ringo is kind of like the odd man out a bit. But they're jamming out songs throughout this thing. They're goofing around. There's all kinds of just insane footage. The clarity of this video for that year, for that time, is astonishing. The fact that this is over 50 years old and came out in clear living color in a way that probably couldn't have been duplicated even now. It's just an achievement, like an unbelievable achievement. I wonder why they wanted to release this and get this out. It's kind of sad it took all this time to get out, because I'm sure there are a lot of Beatle fans that aren't around anymore that would have loved to have seen all of this amazing footage. The rooftop concert itself, the drama with the police showing up, it's great stuff. They've even got like man on the street asking people what they think of the Beatles playing this concert. Some people don't even know it's the Beatles. Other people knew exactly what was going on. Some people were really fed up and wanted the noise to stop, which I think is rather comical. I'd be like, excuse me, this is kind of a big deal. You know, this is going to be in the archives for the next 50 years. You might want to just shut up and listen, right? But apparently it was very loud. And of course, the police show up. They're in the lobby. They're recording everything. They record the police. Again, it's like a movie, like you would just cast characters to do these things. But these guys show up. They wind up on the roof. Everybody's getting filmed. All of the editing going into this is just incredible. Apparently there were like, I don't know, 150 hours worth of footage that they had to condense into these 2+ hour segments that become Get Back. So that in and of itself is amazing. They had to make a lot of editorial decisions. There was a moment in the movie which I did not appreciate, and it was a gratuitous sort of injection of woke politics regarding what Get Back was originally supposed to be. It was supposed to be, I guess, kind of a protest song about immigration issues. And they were making the case that, you know, the Beatles were against all of the so-called discrimination and supremacy, nationalism, that it's just maddening that they would inject that into a movie that was made 50 years ago. Now, again, there's no context to all of that other than checking out some of the headlines of the time. But rather than putting that on the cutting room floor, they thrust that right out there. And then they even had a little like subtext on screen telling people, you know, the Beatles were against all of this evil stuff that we're seeing today, which I thought was just divisive and gratuitous and didn't belong in this. This is where woke politics seep into something that it didn't need to happen. Another amazing part of this movie is Billy Preston. All right, Billy Preston shows up, and all of a sudden, these guys are on point. They were struggling. Billy Preston walks in. His talents, his keyboard playing, his demeanor, the smile, endless smile on his face, just lights up the room, and the Beatles are off to the races at that point. And they're praising, you know, Billy, and they even say at one point, "You're part of the band." They say something like, "Welcome to the band." And, you know, the idea that Billy Preston was the fifth Beatle, certainly, I believe so. Watching what he added, the rooftop concert really didn't focus a whole lot. They didn't have a lot of footage of Billy Preston, and they put him behind, I think, John Lennon. So it was hard to see Billy up there. Would have been nice if they had focused some on Billy Preston because of just his talent, what he added to it, the energy, the excitement. Overall, even though this was really tedious, I'm going to be honest, this was a very tedious movie documentary to watch. It's too long, but there is some drama to the buildup. They go from the old building to the Apple building, which is a nice transition. You've got the issues with George going on. You kind of know how this is going to resolve itself. The rooftop concert goes off, but they have to record the other songs in studio, the ones they couldn't play on the roof for whatever reason because of the noise and time constraints, or the fact that maybe they didn't have all the arrangements down. All in all, this is I don't want to say a must watch, but if you're a rock historian, you want some entertainment, you want to learn some things firsthand about just how these guys put together an album, how the late stages of the Beatles were hectic. They weren't cohesive. Paul McCartney was going his way. John Lennon seemed more interested in Yoko Ono, just going to say it. Ringo, I think, is the odd man out, and George obviously had his own musical vision at that moment, and hints of All Things Must Pass were definitely in this movie. I think at one point they did a little workup of that particular song, and it's just kind of tragic that they couldn't have worked things out where George was on equal footing with Paul and John. But George has such a quiet personality. They always said George was the quiet Beatle. And you see it. Although Ringo was almost as quiet as George. It's just that when Ringo does eventually speak, he tends to be a bit of a clown and he does crazy things. So again, all in all, I would have to recommend watching this and then, draw your own conclusions from it. There are a lot of things going on in this, and you realize that these relationships were fragile. When George walked out, whether it was edited on purpose or not, it seemed as though there was a bit of blowing off steam, as if these guys were either happy that he had walked out, or maybe they were blowing off steam because they were upset that they had pushed George to leaving. And they suggested, by the way, recruiting Eric Clapton, which I think is interesting and rather ironic right now. They honestly thought, hey, we'll get Clapton to fill in for George Harrison. But that never happened because George did come back after some negotiations and some uncomfortable dialogue between himself and Paul McCartney and John Lennon and everybody. And to their credit, they worked it out enough that George felt comfortable to come back. But you can always kind of see a sort of a, I don't know, I would call a little bit of a tortured look on George's face through a lot of this, as if he really has nothing to do. Like he's got all these ideas, but he's got to keep them to himself. And when he vocalizes them, he tends to get into a sort of a tit for tat argument with Paul McCartney, less so with John Lennon. But I think George, in his own right, and we saw that during his career, that he could hold his own musically and come up with some great compositions. Paul McCartney will always be like the hit maker, and John Lennon, to a lesser extent, John is more concerned about just making himself happy, whereas Paul, I think, is more concerned about just putting out great music for the masses to consume. And that's kind of the whole thing. Paul McCartney, is he a genius? Yes. Is John Lennon a genius? To a lesser degree. George Harrison, I think, would be after Paul McCartney as far as genius status. Ringo is just a great drummer, a smart man. I wouldn't say he's a musical genius, but he's certainly somebody who, especially now, after all these years, probably just runs circles around other people when it comes to instinct and style and at least knowing what's good. Maybe he doesn't write it, but even if he doesn't write it, he knows what's great. And if he does write it, he knows who else to bring in to help him bring his vision to completion. Anyway, sorry, I know I'm going a little bit long here, but it was a very long documentary. So check it out. It's on Disney Plus. You can buy Disney Plus, like I'm going to, for a month and then cancel it because, yeah, I got no more use for it. I'm sure someday this will come out on deluxe DVD box set and they'll make some more money off of it. It is rather stunning. And I'm sure they'll probably put in a whole bunch of bonus footage that didn't get to this actual Disney release, because they said, again, 150 hours worth of footage, and God knows what's in all of that. So this might go on for another 100 years before we see it all. In any event, that's my video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.